Hey guys, and welcome to Film Artsy, your #1 source for all things films, movies, and superheroes. My name is Elijah, and Shazam has officially released, and we have already taken a look at the movie and decided to make a full-on review and also explain the ending to that movie. The DCEU's kind of been in a weird place just because the movies have kind of been mixed in reception, and the stakes were higher than ever with this movie, and they really needed to knock it out of the park if they wanted a chance to kind of get the DCEU back on track. Fortunately enough, we think this movie actually satisfied in that way to an extent, so let's go ahead and jump into this full movie review. But there is, of course, a quick spoiler alert, so if you haven't seen the movie yet and you don't want to know any details of the movie, come back to this video later, follow us on all of our social medias, and come watch us review, and let us know what you think of the movie in the comments down below. Alright, let's jump into this one. So this is definitely the most light-hearted movie we've seen in the DCEU to date, and it's definitely a new approach that we haven't really seen before in this existing universe. But with them trying to make this movie much more lighthearted than, say, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, did they actually succeed in making this movie a fun movie to watch altogether? And the answer to that question is definitely yes. This movie tonally is exactly on point with what they set out to do. If you watch the trailer to this movie, you pretty much are going in for that same experience that you'll actually get out of the movie, which is really reassuring because it shows that this movie didn't use cheap tricks to get people enticed to watch the movie, kind of like what we saw in Suicide Squad. And this movie kind of from the beginning to the end had this idea of what it wanted to do as far as tone was concerned, and it's pretty good here. To start off, the casting with Billy Batson being played by both Zachary Levi and Asher Angel is really good here. Zachary Levi does a really great job as kind of playing this version of like maybe a Superman that's actually 15, and just kind of that comedic quips that go with being an immature superhero, and it works really well here. But even Asher Angel plays a pretty good Billy Batson as the 15 or 14-year-old version of him from beginning to end. It's really not that jarring to see this character switch between being an adult and a child. The character pretty much feels consistent across the board, and that's really reassuring to see. Zach Dylan Grazer, who plays Freddy, also is a really good supporting character through and through, and actually almost serves as a good foil for Billy Batson as a whole. But what really stands out in this movie is that the writing made this film fun, and it's actually a really funny movie beginning to end. There's just a lot of constant things kind of being thrown at you, but besides just like jokes and dialogue between things, there's also a ton of situational comedy that really shows that there was a lot of planning and thought that went into how they were going to tell the story and to develop it, where maybe Shazam has more of a generic background, but they did it in a way that was unique enough where this film stands on its own extremely well. But at the same time, Shazam's not afraid to kind of go down a pretty dark and edgy route either. The beginning of the film actually stays pretty serious in kind of the prologue section of the movie, and they develop this character who ends up being the villain in a pretty sympathizing manner. It adds some complexity to the depth behind this character and why he has the motives that he has, and that's really nice to see for any character that's supposed to be an antagonist. Why the characters want to do the things that they do is really important. And with the dark and edgy stuff, there's actually some scenes pretty early on that are kind of pretty dark for a movie that tries to be a more upbeat version, but it works because it's contrasted by just this kid protagonist that's just kind of going through the regular day-to-day life of a kid, but also a foster kid who's trying to find his place in the world and is dealing with a ton of feelings of abandonment and doesn't really want to adjust to any family or foster family that takes him in. It sounds like a dark premise, but they keep it so upbeat with just constant things that are really just well written and funny throughout. And like we said earlier, while we've seen a ton of superhero origin stories, Shazam really does it differently, where we see kind of a unique take on a lot of the tropes we've seen before in other comic book movie adaptations. And during the first act of this film, they do a really good job at kind of showing us who Billy Batson is, more so than who he is after he gets his powers. He actually doesn't get his powers until a decent length into the movie, which really helps kind of separate the fact that Billy Batson is a character and has some actual depth to him before he's introduced to these powers, and we get to see how the powers change the way that he looks at life and his overall philosophy. As the movie progresses, we have a lot of fun kind of just seeing like what teenagers would do if they found out that they had superpowers, and it's kind of practical. Like, if you had superpowers for a day, we feel like for the most part you would try some of these things. And the fact that Freddy is such a huge superhero fan, it really does a good play of just kind of who the audience is of this movie. It's very aware of who's watching this film, and it gives us another character we can relate to, and it just makes some of those funny scenes pretty great. Once again, what you see in the trailers is a pretty accurate translation of what you're going to see in this movie. There's a ton of scenes that weren't included in the trailers that are also kind of at that same level of quality that you see in the trailers, and it's pretty appreciated. This movie really just starts off with a bang and really just has a ton of great things going for it. It's just in the later sections of the movie, some of the things that they had been setting up for a while seem to have some issues as far as pacing is concerned or depth was concerned. It's nothing necessarily that absolutely destroys the movie, but it's definitely something in retrospect, if you reflect on this movie, you might have wished they did things a little bit differently. For instance, early on in the film, they make you sympathize with the character who ends up being the villain, and then we kind of see that he's been obsessed with this idea of gaining these magical powers ever since he got denied, and we see his anger from never really being accepted, but honestly, he kind of acts on that and resolves that little narrative plot in the first act of the film, and the rest of his motives kind of seem jaded or unexplained. Just the demon monsters that are in him tell him that he needs to defeat the champion, and that's what he becomes obsessed with doing next. There's no real motive behind why he needs to do it. He already got his revenge early on, and mind you, the revenge scene is really cool, really dark, but it just felt weird that this character was so motivated to just do what the demons were saying. Obviously, they were somewhat controlling him, but it just made the villain not as interesting as maybe they could have done it. Similarly, they spend a ton of time on Billy Batson's backstory, and they really flesh him out as a character while also kind of showing who he was and who he is now. The main issue, though, is just kind of where he goes as Billy Batson himself, not necessarily as Shazam. We know that the theme of family and finding your place in the world is such a huge part of this movie, and they definitely make it clear and repeat it throughout the film, more in a telling way than a showing way, but it felt like the mysteries around Billy Batson's backstory that were established in the first act are kind of just brushed aside in the last act. They kind of just give a quick explanation as to what happened, and he's kind of over it and moves on and goes to fighting some bad guys. But I mean, these are almost nitpicking issues. As a whole, the movie pacing is pretty good. There's just a few little hitches here and there where we wish maybe they fleshed things out a little bit more than kind of going down the safer route or the sped up route. But a lot of these issues can definitely be forgiven just because there's some really great jokes and some moments where I felt like I was really just enjoying some of the comedic things that they do. It's also really nice to know that this movie definitely exists in the same universe as characters like Superman, Batman, and Aquaman, but it also is self-contained enough where it doesn't feel like they're trying to shoehorn a ton of different things in. It's a Shazam movie on its own altogether, and we appreciated that. The story easily focuses about Billy Batson and his evolution as a person beginning to end, and it doesn't necessarily force a ton of different things into the story. Too much, at least. There's that moment kind of at the end of the movie where all of the foster brothers and sisters get the individual powers of Shazam. And like, we know this happens in the comics, but we feel like the ending of the movie would have been a little more satisfying maybe if they kind of let Billy Batson as Shazam solve it as himself, by himself, and then maybe at the end he discovers that he can give the powers to other people and then does it. But this issue is really just overlooked at seeing the overall growth in Billy Batson, just because he really comes from this isolated character to this character that's willing to accept and open up to other people, and that's really where the main message in this story lies. At first, he's really just trying to look out for himself, and he kind of evolves into this character that cares about other people. I mean, simply put, Shazam's just a more fun Superman movie. He has a lot of similar powers, plus electricity, but it's really fun. He's fun about what he does. Sometimes it felt like the things that were least important were really important to the characters in the movie. Like, for instance, when they're in the school and Freddy really wants Shazam to show up at lunch so he can show off how cool he is for knowing Shazam, and then he's let down, and that's a huge plot point in this movie. Even though the stakes around it weren't that high, that's like a really important thing to a teenager, how you're perceived by your peers, and that was just some really good writing rather than making it feel like the whole universe is at risk of dying. The movie is so self-contained, we felt like the smaller things that were important really were important. But overall, this movie is a fun movie to watch. The last act definitely struggles a little bit in just how it paces things out and how it wraps some things up, but the first two acts are so good, it really outweighs any of our smaller complaints from the last act of this film. And if anything, this movie does a great job at setting up what they could do for possible sequels. It's really, really fun, and we hope that they do more with this character, Shazam. This movie overall could arguably be one of the best movies we've seen in the DCEU. It's really up for interpretation, as we do know that there is some people who really did enjoy the third act. Some of us, even at Film Artsy, kind of had some different opinions on that final act of the film. So let us know definitely what you thought of Shazam in the comments down below, just because it's a definitely varied opinion. We can see both sides of the argument on how they wrapped up the movie, but as a whole, this movie is so much fun. We really can't explain in words how the lightheartedness and the comedic parts work, but it really, really does work in the general overall universe. There's a lot of time just dedicated to developing these characters and putting them in some funny scenarios where the film feels almost halfway like a comedy movie more than a regular action superhero movie that it's classified as. But if we were to maybe compare this to like Marvel's Ant-Man or Ant-Man and the Wasp, how those movies are more of the comedic movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Shazam does that, but also kind of does it a lot better because the stakes feel more important, and there definitely is a connection to the characters more than just kind of getting a brief rundown of who the character is at the beginning. They really took time to develop it, and we appreciate it. Of course, we wish they would have made some sort of Captain Marvel reference in this movie. I felt like I kept waiting for it, because if you didn't know, originally the character Shazam was called Captain Marvel, and obviously Marvel also has a character called Captain Marvel, and the movies are coming out a month apart, so it would have been weird. But it would have been fun if maybe when they're trying to come up with a name for Shazam, they suggest Captain Marvel, and maybe Billy says, "Isn't that name already taken?" It just would have been a really funny joke that they could have done to make a reference to the character Captain Marvel and the fact that that was his name. We don't really get any reference to that, and like I said, it's not going to affect the watch experience of the movie by any means, but it would have been really nice. If you're on the fence about this movie, definitely check it out. But let's go ahead and switch gears and talk about the ending of this film a little bit too. While we were a little bit nitpicky about the fact that he gave the powers to his foster siblings and now they all can use the Shazam abilities individually too, it actually could be a really cool plot device down the road if they either do a sequel or some sort of team-up movie again, just because it gives more characters in general to be involved. And honestly, it kind of gives Shazam the ability to summon a team of other people to help him out in battle, which is cool. And it could be really cool if they ever did like another Justice League and use Shazam as a character, because he could always recruit his foster siblings to come and help out in the fights. Of course, the final scene of the movie definitely has a kind of cool moment with how Shazam does in fact show up to lunch with Freddy, just so he can be shown that he wasn't lying about knowing Shazam. Definitely feels like something right out of Spider-Man Homecoming, but it's a pretty fun scene, and the fact that it's at the end of the movie kind of gives it the length to maybe expand itself a little bit outside of its self-containment and seek the bigger DCEU. And of course, they make that huge Superman cameo as he also shows up to have lunch with Freddy. But of course, as you guys know, Henry Cavill is no longer going to be Superman, so they just kind of didn't show the face, because we really don't know who's going to be playing the next Superman in the DCEU. And overall, we don't even know how they're going to kind of reboot that character, but it was kind of nice to acknowledge that, yeah, Superman still exists in this universe. We don't know how we're going to do it yet or who's going to play him, but he's there, he's in the background, and he's going to come back to some extent sometime one day. We did really appreciate the choice to have Superman there at the end rather than a different character in the DCEU also, because in a way, Shazam is kind of a parody of Superman as a whole. If you look at the comic book origins and how DC obtained the rights to Shazam way back in the day, it was kind of a mock of Superman, and they kind of were aware of that this whole way through the movie, just making him this 14-year-old Superman. And just the fact that they had the actual Superman there also kind of acknowledges that self-awareness, but also, like we said earlier, kind of paints the bigger picture to what they might be doing in the DCEU. But overall, this movie was pretty fun. It definitely didn't let us down from our generally set expectations, and if anything, it actually exceeded what we thought could come out of this movie. It definitely is a better movie than what we initially expected, and it deserves a lot of the praise that it has been getting. Alright, and that's it for today. Did you guys enjoy this movie? Let us know what you thought of it in the comments down below. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe with notifications on for more coverage on all things superheroes, and we'll see you all next time with a brand new video.
What's up, Dorito? Then, better late than never, Captain America, Chris Evans, crashes the interview. Hugs all around, but hey, where's Roxy?
I'm sorry.
Chris Evans.
You two are...
Hi.
You both are relevant. Great, thanks.
Okay. This interview actually ended 2 minutes ago, and we just refused to leave. Look at this guy.
He's gonna do some stunts.
Right?
Yeah, he's my fella.
I just said that you're Susan's free pass.
Are you a baby?
Oh, wow.
Are you Avery? You're a pretty girl. Yes. Are you happy?
Hey guys, we hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, make sure you guys hit the like button down below and subscribe for more Film Artsy. If you guys want to showcase your talent to the world, Film Artsy is the best place for you guys to do it. Please submit your videos to filmartsyofficial@gmail.com, or you guys can click the link in the description. We really want to see what kind of talent you guys can provide. So let us know, send us an email, and we'll check out your videos, and we'll see you all in the next video.
Talking?
I'm about to.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
Hi.
Hi. See you guys.